minute, 10 minute, 10 minute murder. 10 minute, 10 minute, 10 minute murder. 10 minute, 10 minute, 10 minute murder. 10 minute, 10 minute, 10 minute murder.
Hi there. Welcome to 10 Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. My name is Joe. I'm the host, and thank you for being here. I've had people ask recently, because I haven't talked about it recently, how they can give me a suggestion for a story they'd like for me to possibly cover here on 10 Minute Murder. And there are actually a couple of different ways. First, you can connect with 10 Minute Murder on social media. The show notes of this episode will have the links to that. Or you can just type in 10 Minute Murder into Facebook or Instagram and it'll pop right up. You can send that to me, your story idea, via direct message, and I'll get that. Or you can email it if it's easier to do that, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. 10minutemurder@gmail.com. And the story you're going to hear today is one of those suggestions. It came to me as a suggestion because there is a podcast called The Orange Tree. It's fantastic. I've listened to it from start to finish, and it's very well done. However, it's hours and hours long. So the suggestion was to take as much information from the case as I could and give it the 10-minute murder treatment. And if you still want more information after this episode is over and you have not listened to The Orange Tree, I would suggest you do that if you are into the longer form podcasts. Which I am. If I've got time, I will definitely listen to those longer ones, especially if they're good, like that one is. In August of 2005, University of Texas students were moving into the dorms and the apartments of the campus, excited about the beginning of a new school year. However, on the western edge of the university campus, there was one apartment with yellow police tape going across the door. Inside, a young woman's body lay in the bathtub, her hands and head severed. Somebody had brutally shot and dismembered 21-year-old Jennifer Cave. Jennifer Ray Cave was born March 12, 1984, to Charles and Sharon Cave as one of their 4 children. She lived in Austin, Texas, but had grown up and graduated from high school in Corpus Christi. Jennifer enrolled and attended classes at Texas State University and San Marcos, but she struggled academically. She dropped out after 1 semester. Back in Austin, Jennifer had several different jobs, mainly as a waitress. Her battles with drug addiction were well known amongst her friends and family. Still, Jennifer was described as everybody's favorite, a sweet and caring person who tried to help everyone she met. She just needed a little push to get her life back on track. That push came on August 16, 2005, when Jennifer called her mother with good news. A law firm in the state's capital had offered her a great job as a legal assistant. Jennifer was absolutely thrilled. And when Sharon spoke with her daughter again that night around 8:30 p.m., she was still extremely excited about the job and told her mom that she was going to wear the new pantsuit that Sharon had recently bought for her. Later, Jennifer said she was going to sleep and asked her roommate to check in to make sure she was awake in the morning. And Sharon did not know that she had just spoken with her daughter for the last time. The morning of August 17, 2005, Jennifer did not show up for her first day of work. The law firm tried to call her several times and even went to her apartment to leave a note before eventually contacting Sharon, who immediately knew something was wrong. First, she called T-Mobile, Jennifer's phone carrier, who gave Sharon a list of the numbers she had called or had called Jennifer's phone. The last call had been at 1:08 a.m., way after Sharon thought her daughter had gone to sleep. Then Sharon checked the most common numbers on the list and began calling them one by one, hoping somebody would have information about Jennifer. One of the numbers Sharon called belonged to Michael Rodriguez, a friend of Jennifer's who had spoken with her 3 times that night. In the first call, Jennifer had told Michael she was going to spend some time with a friend named Colton. In later calls, Jennifer told Michael that Colton was upset, possibly because of losing his phone, and he had tried to break a window of a parked car. Michael didn't think much of it at the time, and Jennifer didn't sound like she was in distress, and Colton seemed to be just drunk and doing stupid drunk things. Colton was actually one of the people Sharon had already called from the list, but he had not answered. However, as Sharon was on the phone with Michael, Colton returned Sharon's call on her cell phone. Having 2 conversations simultaneously, Sharon asked Colton if he had been with Jennifer the night before. He denied seeing her. Immediately, Michael said, "That's not true. She was with him. He is lying." When confronted, Colton changed his story, saying he had seen Jennifer downtown, but still claimed he did not know where she was. Colton Aaron Petoniak was not just some random guy. Sharon knew her daughter had been spending time with him starting almost immediately after moving to Austin. Colton was a finance major at the University of Texas, and even though the two seemed to be not romantically involved, they had a common interest: drugs. Like in Jennifer's case, Colton's family also was aware of his issues. However, as Colton was an exceptional student with high grades and was well liked by faculty and friends, nobody could have imagined how things would escalate during the summer of 2005. Around 6:30 in the evening on August 17th, Scott Engel, Jennifer's ex-boyfriend, called Colton asking about Jennifer and her whereabouts, as he had been the last person to see her. Colton again denied knowing anything and ended the call saying, "That B is going to get me arrested." Meanwhile, Sharon called every place in Austin she could think of where her daughter might be, including hospitals and even a morgue. She wasn't getting anywhere, so she went to the police station. They took Jennifer's information but didn't do too much because so little time had passed at that point. Sharon continued the search for her daughter by herself. Sharon also kept calling Colton. She was sure he knew more about Jennifer's disappearance than he was telling. Finally, at about 7:30 p.m., Colton returned the call, and Sharon asked again, "Please, do you know anything about Jennifer?" To which Colton replied, "Dude, I'm eating pizza with my friends." And he hung up the phone. The next day, Sharon and her fiancé, Jim, decided to drive to Austin. They left Corpus Christi at around 11 a.m., and while driving, Detective Kathleen Hector called Sharon, informing her that Jennifer's car had been found at 2529 Rio Grande. Officer Hector also told Sharon that Colton Petoniak lived at that address, in apartment number 88. There was no question where Sharon and Jim would head first. They arrived at the Orange Tree condominiums at around 4 p.m., meeting up with Jennifer's sister Vanessa, who had driven from Dallas to help with the search. The three banged on the door and windows of apartment number 88, calling out Jennifer's name, but there was no response. Even though Detective Kathleen Hector had previously told them that the police cannot do anything yet, Sharon called them again. This time, Officer Guillermo Salinas was sent to the Orange Tree. He checked Jennifer's car and knocked on the apartment door, again without an answer. As Officer Salinas did not have the authorization to enter the apartment, Jim asked what would happen if he forced entry. They were desperate. Still, after Officer Salinas left, Sharon and Jim first tried to enter the apartment with a locksmith, but he also failed to open the door. Finally, Sharon noticed one of the windows was cracked, and fearing that they were running out of time, Jim entered the apartment through that window. Inside, he called out, "I'm here to help. Please don't hurt me. Please don't shoot me. I'm looking for you, Jennifer." Nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to see in the bathroom. As he walked through the apartment, Jim smelled something. He opened the bathroom door and the horrible odor hit him in the face. It took a second for him to really understand what he saw: a decapitated body in the bathroom. Jim immediately returned outside, Sharon yelling, "Is it her? Is it her?" Jim answered, "I think so." They had found Jennifer. The autopsy later revealed that Jennifer's cause of death had been a single gunshot that lacerated her aorta. However, what had been done to her body after she was dead was way more gruesome. Her head and hands were detached. Her body was full of post-mortem stab wounds, and her head had been shot after it had been severed from her body. Police quickly discovered a Smith & Wesson .380 from Colton's car and determined that it was the same weapon used in Jennifer's murder. Meanwhile, Colton left Austin with a woman named Laura Hall, crossed into Mexico, and made their way to Piedras Negras. 4 days later, Mexican police arrested the two at a motel and turned them over to the United States Marshals. Colton stated, "If this is a murder charge, then I know exactly what this is about," as you probably should when there's a headless body found in your bathtub. Colton was accused of shooting Jennifer and was charged with her murder. During his testimony, he called Jennifer, quote, "my best friend," and said that his excessive use of alcohol and Xanax caused a blackout that night, leaving him with no memory of firing a bullet. However, CCTV captured Colton at a hardware store where he purchased an 8-inch hacksaw, safety mask, ammonia, and other cleaning products. On the way back to dismember the body, he stopped at Burger King for a breakfast combo. Colton apparently had a strong stomach. The jury deliberated just an hour and 25 minutes before returning with the verdict: guilty. Colton Petoniak was sentenced to 55 years in prison. He will be eligible for parole once 50% of his sentence has been served. Laura Hall was charged with hindering apprehension and was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison. She was released in 2018 after serving her time. Her involvement in the murder and dismemberment itself is unclear. Some believe she was the one who fired the fatal shot. However, later after her release, when asked in an interview if she had any concern for the girl in the bathtub, she answered, "I wasn't able to even process. And even today, I have not processed the emotions. I don't know who she was." Even though Laura was not interested in who Jennifer was, many others were. In 2020, a 7-part podcast documentary of Jennifer's case called The Orange Tree was published by The Drag. The show hosts, Tinu Thomas and Haley Butler, wanted to dig into Jennifer's life and learn who she was behind all of the sensational and gruesome facts of her death. The podcast regularly broke into the top 50 of shows on Apple Podcasts and the top 10 for true crime, and includes new interview material from most of the key characters of the case, including several members of the Cave and Petoniak family. To this day, we don't know for sure what happened and why Jennifer died. And that is one of the reasons the Orange Tree podcast was created, to remind us, as Tanu said, that a crime like this could have happened to anybody. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thanks for listening today. And if you've got a suggestion for an upcoming episode you'd like for me to possibly look into and talk about here on 10-Minute Murder, you can send that to me via email, 10minutemurder@gmail.com. Or if it's easier, you can connect on Facebook or Instagram and send that via direct message. The show notes of this episode, you'll find the links to where you can find 10-Minute Murder on social media, or just as easily go to Facebook or Instagram and type in 10-Minute Murder. It'll pop right up. If you have any friends that you think might be into brief true crime stories like this, please let them know about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.